accusations and stuff like that.
Oh my God. This is not a film about John Stockton. And if you don't know, I believe John Stockton is a top 5 point guard. Even though he may not have a left hand, he still found a way to succeed in the league and become a true generational talent. He deserves all the praise that he gets.
The year was 2019, and the NBA storyteller was face to face with fate. It had only been 13 months since he laid out the case against John Stockton's left hand, a quickly accepted and now commonly understood fact. But in certain pockets of the discourse, the revelation went off like a bomb. Aging Utah apologists would emerge from their hibernation. Honed in on the storyteller, they unleashed their pent-up frustration. But to the storyteller, this grief was misguided. John was just a tool, just the tip of the iceberg. And the storyteller would not take the bait. As we established, there was so much more to say, bigger fish to fry, and John was no longer relevant.
Here we go. This is the beginning. The beginning of the extension. Arms out. Balls back. Way back. No, it's a dribble. That's an amazing move. Look at this guy. This guy was good. I mean, he really did this point guard thing differently. But there's something so distinctly 80s about his play style. You know what's special about basketball? Of the major sports, hoops is the one that requires you to develop your offhand the most. I mean, Tom Brady isn't dinged because he can't finish with his left, or throw a touchdown, I guess. Baseball, well, that whole game is tailored around right or left side dominance. I mean, when you have switch hitters, that's rare, but also it doesn't usually result in a great all-time hitting on both sides kind of player. It usually brings out the mediocrity in both sides. And then there's the rest of us humans, the non-professional basketball players. That's what I like to call myself. Nobody expects us to have any offhand dexterity. I mean, you could be a full-blown adult, completely educated, a professor, and still write like a goddamn 4-year-old with your offhand. And that's peak refinement in society. Multiple degrees, educated, got a beard. And you can't write with your left. Okay.
We're going somewhere.
Okay.
This is when the storyteller sensed his own digression, as he slowly lost his ability to differentiate a convincing argument from desperation and pleading. He would continue on to assure his audience there is a greater point to all this, and it's not a ploy to rehash an old debate.
I have a much bigger point here, much bigger than one dude.
See?
I'm trying to solve problems here and define generations. We're going somewhere. Going the wrong way on a one-way street.
The storyteller's destination was near, but he has yet to introduce the bottom 90% of the iceberg. Maybe the task was ours all along. So, let's start in the 1980s. This is an era obscured by nostalgia, legend, the abundance of highlights, and a lack of deeper narrative. But it wasn't the Dark Ages. It was just recent enough, just covered enough to bolster and justify the careers that emerged from that era. The league was integrated. The average height had finally crossed over to legitimately tall. We were past the all-important merger, and the three-point line gave us the familiar court we recognize today. And with these framings, marketing, and progression in TV broadcasting, it became easy to include this early era within our modern basketball qualifier. But it can quickly become apparent that the attitudes and approach of the 80s has less in common with the 90s and aughts than the 50s and 60s, when players had day jobs, drove themselves to away games, and potential all-time greats were never let into the league.
And here we are. Big statement ahead. I believe, and the evidence shall show, that the 80s should just be thrown out and disregarded as a cute age of basketball development, much like the 50s. We don't consider those players to be all-time skilled players, but we understand it's important for the progress of the league. The 80s are that also. I mean, don't get me wrong. Was it hard to win professional basketball championships in 1981?
Yeah.
Did you have to be really, really good at basketball to make it?
Yeah.
Is there some gray area towards the end of the 80s where there was some skill, some unique modern basketball being played? Well, yeah, but that's my point. That's the whole point. The late 80s is when a few key discoveries were made, and it basically all happened at once. And we are going there. But for now, I just want to highlight how freaking different our game is between then and now. And I'm going to call this section, this chapter, Clearly F***ing Obvious. I don't think I'll keep up this chapter name thing for the whole piece, but let's do one. Chapter 1. And since it is clearly f***ing obvious, I'm going to do it quickly. If you want to hear exactly what I'm saying, either listen up or slow it down. Here we go. The training, dedication, and expectations of a player in the 21st century isn't found in any circumstance in the early or mid-80s. The obvious is the advancement in training and the ability to develop. Almost all in-game obstacles can be recreated in a practice setting. A simple exercise like taking contact, holding in the air, and finishing a layup was essentially non-existent in 1985. And that extends to dribbling, ball control, hand-eye coordination, even the almost universal ability leaping. This was once a mystical ability bestowed upon a blessed child like head size or double-jointed thumbs. Now we've cracked the code on leaping ability. See? Look at this kid. And the solidifier in today's refined and expanded ability is something even more basic: age. The level in which kids train and gain actual useful basketball skills, including the concept of being on the road and being legitimately organized, can all start as early as a parent once. Look at this kid. With his existence, this trajectory does not exist anywhere in the 80s. Fitness, muscle endurance, health, eating, the shaping of human vessels was not anywhere close to today's. Gone are the times of finding a 6'10" African who never touched a basketball till the age of 16, because every man from 1 to 12 on teams now is truly developed. Gone are the big men for big men's sake, the lumbering giants who offer not much more than an obstacle in front of a goal. Players start so young, even the eventual 7-footers learn the same ball handling and point guard skills that eventually point guards do. Gone are the crowd-rousing moments when Yao puts up a 3 in an all-star game, to even the announcer's delight. Gone are the times when Shaq faced up and dribbled in the most basic way to a crowd seemingly reacting to a Game 7 buzzer beater. Gone are the days that the 11th and 12th man were cheered on by the crowd just when they get in the game and vigorously applauded at a chance of an actual score. And this is because a 12th man in true modern era form isn't a lucky chance story. And a simple exploration around the league reveals just that. The talent is so great, the pool of talent is worldwide, and the league is limited, which means every single player must be a skilled player. And none of this should even be up for debate. And for real, as the commentary community expands, we are going to find out more and more how far behind the 80s were in terms of basketball ability. And for all the players that we deem great, all the careers and legacies that hang around the top of our top 10 lists that were developed in the 80s will come crashing down. They will live on as pillars and shoulders to stand on, but in terms of skill in placing one player over another player, these players represented a different time and a different ability. All these legendary legacies that have coasted for decades have been or will be called into question. For us, to this point, history has been handed down to us, handed down to the following era of players and fans. But it's this era of fans that will finally test that history. What I want to do is start simple in a very obvious way. I want to level our understanding of an era that some feel way too familiar with, the 80s. And the way I want to show this is through one skill. A skill that at one point seemed to be more of an inconvenience than a skill. Dribbling. We are in a dribbling paradise. Look at these moves. Look at these whippy-doos. Look at this woobity-doobits. and that flibbity stare down, and shabbity sham gods, and scorbity step backs, and stibbity side swipes. And of course, this combo badoobity. Look at these moves! These are amazing, but I'm more interested in something simple. Something simple that was so important. I want to know when this turned into this. When did this turn into this? Into this. I want to know what turned this.
Jordan can throw it off like he did if he wants to. Not only a great score, but a great...
It was another late night for the storyteller. During daylight, between government work and tending to the needy dozen, there isn't much time for fun. Okay, but he's on a warpath to clarify why exactly professional athletes dribble like that. Is that it? That's all?
Yeah, man, that's it. Read what it says.
All right.
Just wake him up, okay?
Okay.
What is this? What is this? What is this?
Hey, storyteller, I think your videos are great. You present a lot of useful information in a very entertaining way. Your video about John Stockton not having a left was great, but there's a lot more that needs to be said about him if you want to break down the dirty little secrets of his career.
No, I don't want it.
That's all?
Yes. Let's get through this. This slappy doofus, look at me ma kind of dribbling right in front of you. Somehow, this survived, this style, for nearly 40 years in professional basketball. From the 40s to the 80s. And despite various innovators coming in and out of the league, Walt, Tiny, Pete, they were unable to trigger the new age of ball handling. Why did it look so strange? In front, head on. You know what this looked like? Like what a cardboard cutout would do if it played basketball. But you know what? It made sense. Because in early basketball, dribbling essentially was a last resort. When you watch any of these early ages, the game is dominated by the pass. Coaching was pushing the pass. Move when you don't have the ball and pass. And only when absolutely necessary, pound it once or twice just to get in a better position to pass or score. So what you end up with is an unrefined, underdeveloped aspect of hoops. And ideas like tricking somebody with your actual dribble, these ideas were so far in the distant future. I mean, really, if you look at the entire league and its entire existence, for the majority of its existence, dribbling was more of an inhibitor than anything. It's like wearing a potato sack in a race, or tying your ankle to another person while you balance an egg on a spoon that's in your mouth. Dribbling a ball while you run was pretty hard. It was a hard thing to do. And this is why, when basketball met innovators, we got this. Advancements in passing. They were well on their way, as it was the linchpin of progress. With so much focus on the pass, experimentation was inevitable. No looks, fakes, behind the back. This was our first step toward the jazz that is our sport, the flow. And it makes you wonder, all the other skills that would come later. Is it an issue of ability? The league-wide stagnation on dribbling as we ticked past the 50s into the 60s? Or was it just the lack of demand? I mean, Bob was literally out here dropping people to the floor. Embarrassing folks. Look at this. Damn it. Damn. And what is this game? There's no need for a combo, multi-layered crossover. The shit he was dealing might have killed somebody. Look at it. And it's amazing to me that this huge aspect of the game that is so dominant now from every position. Ball handling. Could be such an afterthought for so many years. I wonder if I could, eat this computer. It's like piece by piece. How long would that take?
Hey bro, first of all, who was it that decided assists were the only criteria for judging the effectiveness of a point guard? The assist is the most fraudulent statistic in basketball. Imagine a panel of men sitting at the scorer's table and deciding whether or not they're going to award you an assist. It's embarrassing, embarrassing, embarrassing. If you hang your legacy as a player on the practice of being credited with assists, you're placing your legacy squarely in the hands of fat old men who aren't even playing the game. Who even decided assists were such a valuable statistic anyway? The first guy to put up ridiculous per season assist numbers? Kevin Jeffrey Porter. No, you don't know who he is. He averaged 13.4 assists per game and scored 15.4 points per game in 1979, and he didn't make the All-NBA team or an All-Star team. Not that year, not any year. And he led the league in assists 4 times. Nobody cared about assists, at least not until Magic Johnson entered the league, and Lakers fans and the West Coast media had to come up with a statistical way to argue for the dominance of a player who couldn't reliably score more than 18 points or reliably grab more than 8 rebounds a game, while his arch nemesis out east was putting up 20 and 10 with regular.
Oh, stop it! So when we're exploring innovation, we always have to question this. Is it standard human progression? Just like any field of study, math, astronomy, physics, as time moves on, we first stand on the shoulders of the ones before us, and then we innovate. The jump shot, the passing, dunking, alley-oops. What we could do with 5 guys in a ball was constantly expanding, with many hiding pioneers to reveal themselves. But there's got to be a guy somewhere early in the process that discovers the purpose of dribbling from one side to the other, and back to the other. And not just as an accident or forced necessity, but as a preference, as an advantage. But was this advancement an innovation of a singular intelligence or a discovery within a natural human progression? You know what I mean? For example, the pyramids. The fact that across the globe in completely isolated corners of the world, society, civilizations built this very similar structure, for whatever reason, all in this particular space of time. Seriously, there's something about us as humans that when we hit a certain point of existence, in our particular age and surroundings, we all have the same epiphany. Let's build a triangle. So back to dribbling, how did this turn into this? What I'm assuming is it was natural human progression, and that there were kids all over the country experimenting with dribbling, and it was only a matter of time till they entered the league. And maybe these kids were inspired by Pistol, Pete, who clearly had unlocked the potential of actually facing up and dribbling. Maybe the Globetrotters inspired them. Maybe it was that natural progression I mentioned. You know, kind of like how the ostrich and the emu evolved on separate continents. However it was done, it was did. And we did eventually turn into this, where any common old point guard, or point forward, comes up dribbling like this. But the turn happened somewhere, and somebody was right there at the right time when society was ready. So let's find out. But unfortunately, as revolutionary as dribbling side to side is, seriously is, when I Google the history of dribbling, all that comes up is soccer. And no offense to 2 particular people, but nobody cares about soccer right now. Sorry. So this is our task here. Let's start digging. Alright, here it is. Some guy invented basketball. Toss in another couple of guys who figured out a way to approach it. Then some other jerk decided that this was the way to play the game. Somebody else came along and slapped the word fundamentals onto it. and bam, basketball was cursed for the next 40 years. And here is our historical evidence of that curse. An early-ass video of the fundamentals of basketball.
Certain fundamental skills are the foundation upon which winning basketball teams are built.
And what's crazy about this is that dude right there does not look that inept. That man has potential for all kind of abilities. But the emphasis is not on creativity yet. And what happens is that these fundamentals get solidified as the backbone of the sport. Even this crossover right here, the original crossover. For the next 3 to 4 decades, this was it. There would only be one, from Oscar to John. I mean, fast forward, let's check out another decade.
His championship squads spend half of every practice period drilling on basic fundamentals.
Oh shit, the god himself, John Wooden. Hey look, same shit. Sure, those guys might be better at the same shit, but there's nothing different. But of course, at this point in time, the game is not about an individual. It's an organism. It's about the advancement and the cooperation of the organism. And over time, we'll figure out that these big brain concepts fly perfectly fine for other sports, like, I don't know, football. But it's decades until this game of 5-on-5 realizes that 5 is just few enough for any one player to really drive and or carry a team. Which means creativity within an individual is more valuable in this sport than any. And at the core of it, there is no one way to play, only the way that works for the individual. Okay, yikes. Okay, fun, here we go. Let's go ahead and breeze through some years. And let's get really super scientific and technical about the playstyle. All right, here we go. This is authentic, uncut, pure, full potency, right to the main vein 40s basketball. And again, what the hell is with this forceful ass bounce pass? It's so unnecessary in that situation, really. It looks like there's a magnet in the ground, in the earth, pulling the ball down. Next observation. Original basketball in its raw, fundamental glory was basically passing, bounce passes specifically, layups, hook shots, and dribbling like you only live in 2 dimensions. Oh, and when they feel creative, maybe dribble in a very shallow S formation. All right, let's move on. All right, then we got Bob Cousy, and he plays through like 3 decades, never figured out how to get to the next step of dribbling. The late 60s, Jerry, Bob, whole bunch of legends. Same awkwardness. 1974, look at this guy.
Curtis Terry trying to get it across. They're looking for help.
Ha! Okay, here's a perspective. Each generation plays with an aspect of the game, and at the end of it, we have fully passed through to a new realm of the sport. Early, it was the jump shot, right? Actually shooting the ball. Then it was the pass, which lasted like 40 years. Then they started tinkering with dribbling a little more. Then they elevated the game in the air. Maybe that was simultaneous with the dribble. Then they explored the steps, you know, those little extra steps they give you, like the Euro step. And even explored things like the foul, how to draw fouls, that type of stuff. A little more focused. Then it was pushing range, making a 35-foot jump shot a reasonable thought. And now we see folks hyper-focused, exploiting not only the steps, but the concept of the gather step. Who knows what they're going to exploit next? But by far, the longest stagnation was this block here, this 40 years, where dribbling made very few advancements, which was what, 1 of 3 components to basketball? And then you end up with eras where people aren't really developing their games. I mean, I just don't understand how people back then didn't look at other players and try to take their moves, and maybe there wasn't moves. Maybe
The storyteller had lost all control, once again biting off much more than he could chew. The access to endless clips and an emboldened opinion, it's going to be nearly impossible to pull himself out of a spiraling rant.
They never implemented other things. It's like they were set in stone.
Building steam on his momentum and complete lack of a reasoned, informed voice. The unfortunate part is that there is a point to be made, but who can help him find it? Who can help him break this?
Break this down for us and explain how it's possible that Giannis can take so few dribbles, cover so much ground, how it's possible that Giannis can...
This is Coach Nick, NBA YouTube's coach, the breaker down of all things b-ball. And after 11 months of emails, phone calls, door knocks. I finally got him to say yes to an interview via Skype. What are you doing?
Oh, just watching some Zion footage.
That's all I can do here. All right, just come on. Just let me have this one, guys. Okay, so this combo went a lot of places, but we're gonna scrub around here because my patience is thin. All right, here we go. Let's scrub around and get you the good parts here.
All the things that we learned on how to dribble are wrong. The sign of a really good, well-coached player, a guard, is that he never has to turn his back. As when I was growing up, it was like spin move, keep your body, whatever, protect the ball, have your hand out. Now it's you need to be able to, and that's like I have a whole sibling. And Oscar probably didn't have a great left hand, right?
He didn't. It was a lot, and he loved that back down move again.
Oh, I know. Well, that's the other thing is because it's like, you know, the best ball handlers keep their nose behind their toes, is what I say.
Then when did it start becoming something that was on your side? When did that become normal? And back to the original question.
Yeah, and there's a left hand. I mean, left hand, but he's got his whole entire body protecting the ball.
Famously
that's
gets
the Cowens. That's the famous, Cowens guy.
Watch, he tries to do his little reverse move.
Okay, right, because that goes back to that '67 conference finals where they're just letting them shuffle to their left with the dribble hand on the right, and they're not doing anything about it. Right, that was a really, I remember looking at that with my mentor, who was the head coach at the time. This is like in the late '90s, looking at each other going, yeah, why wouldn't you just force him left?
Yes,
because
it's
crazy. I was a huge Magic fan, so certainly growing up, I watched him, but I also was limited by being in Chicago, where you couldn't see a lot of games until like the playoffs. But man, like you're right, like and by the way.
Yep. This is some Magic slander.
How good was Magic's left hand? I almost kind of feel like I'm having trouble picturing in my head like a lot of the. I mean, I guess clearly it wasn't an issue. He could do it, and he can go use his hand.
No, he was. I mean, he wasn't crossing people over. That's the other thing. Like he wasn't facing up and cross. I mean, he could get around.
No, stop. Let's stop here. There's no mistaking. I'm the one here saying that nobody whose career existed mostly before 1989 should ever be considered an all-time great skilled player. I didn't really bring up that point and push it with the coach. But what I did present was the idea that nobody before 1989 should ever really be considered a great ball handler.
Oh, interesting. I would argue it's earlier.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
But so that's...
But he had a lot of caveats and questions and insight. But in general, what he did was he gave me so much detail and brought up so many little points.
So even though you had Pistol and you had Clyde and you had Earl Monroe, and there's other people too, but it didn't, you're right, it didn't really take hold. It was sort of like the one guy.
And continuing threads that this basically turned into an assignment, homework.
Have you ever seen Ernie DiGregorio?
No, I haven't.
Kind of gave me a dozen and a half things to look up and research.
I would imagine it's got to be, I mean, I know in the 90s they were doing it, so it's got to be like, before the 90s. I just found a random page where it's the best NBA point guards of the 70s. Even like, I remember I saw a really good documentary about Ernie Grunfeld and Bernard King. Ernie and Bernie. Did you ever see that one?
No.
It also talks to about like, are players improving across their career? Are they adding things? Are they trying to get better at certain things that might be perceived weaknesses?
So, in that vein, here's my assignment, questions included. What was the state of ball handling across the 80s? And not who was at the top, but what was the bulk of the league bringing each night? And there was only one way I could actually see answering this, and that would be to watch a shit ton of 80s basketball. And not the fun games, not the best ones, not the ones we know, but the other ones. So that's what I did. I set out to watch at least one entire game from every year in the 80s, and I would do my best to find a game that, if not from the regular season, was from an early round of the playoffs. And games that included at least one non-headlighting team. Not the Celtics, not the Lakers. And yes, it is just one game a year, but ask yourself this. Who the hell wants to watch more than that? No, but really, this way, over the course of each game, and over the span of 10 years, I would get a true sense of the ball handling norms, and the ball handling progression. Did I mention I did this all in a row? This was going to be boring, but I'm a professional. So here is a recap of my 24 hours of 80s basketball. Please do not attempt at home. Nobody should ever do this again. Roll it. Let's start with 1980. Lakers versus 76ers. We got a couple of big hitters here. We got Dr. J, we got Magic Johnson. So basically, beyond bringing up the ball, at tops they dribbled 2 times. The defense is atrocious. Magic Johnson, behind the back turnover. Even the announcers at a certain point were surprised Magic went left. They really lost their shit when Magic went left. And unequivocally, when ball handlers encountered defenders, they pick the ball up, pick it up, or turn their back. Pick it up or turn their back. That's going to be a common theme here. There's that odd one where they dribble with one hand and drift the other direction. It's this weird kind of hop skip one. They're skipping, they're hopping and shuffling to one side and dribbling with other hands. Feels so unnatural. It looks unnatural. We move on to 1981. Suns versus Kings. We start to see more of that original crossover, bringing it all the way over, right to left. Drifting, shuffle to the right with the wrong hand. But also what I'm noticing is when people try to switch hands, they often flub it. When they are faced with the defense, and they do try to switch hands, there's clear signs of clumsiness. You order a pizza. And we move on to 1982. Lakers versus Spurs. Lakers, premier team. Spurs, up and coming. Guess what? Same shit. Spurs guard in 1982. These dudes, the least dynamic I've seen so far. 1983. Woo. The only advancement I'm really catching by 1983 is we're getting a lot more pull-ups off the dribble. Damn, it's the same shit, man. And I'll say, lack of attack from point guards. It has the defense so apoplectic. They give guards so much space. It's nuts. It's like there's this understanding. As long as I don't press you, you don't attack me. 1984. Suns versus the Jazz. One large pepperoni. You know, Adrian Dantley was and is the foul guy. He drew more fouls than James Harden ever would. I really think this was a pivotal year because folks did get more aggressive. Jab steps, feint attempt at driving, but it just made their offhand more obvious. It almost looked worse as they tried more. 1985. Let's go. Blazers and the Mavericks. Guards are definitely quicker, more aggressive, but still stuck to their dominant hand. 2 dribble drives now and then. Crossovers are still, for the most part, non-existent. Still turning their back to the defender. We are getting some more pump fakes. What the hell is my pizza? Fast breaks are still a straight line. Just a race, leaning up against each other. 1986. The Hawks and the Pistons. Isaiah was quicker than anyone else at this point. Isaiah pushes all the categories. Still not much face up to defend, and the basic right to left cross is in effect. We've got a tad more stylized dribbling. This is the big advancement, meaning not just a hand on top of the ball. We've got that hand grabbing from the side. Is that a bug on the ceiling? That may turn into a full-blown crossover in years to come. I mean, if we have Spud in the game, and at this point in his career, he's looking just as stale as the rest of the league. Which goes against common wisdom that the small guys would have to be expert ball handlers, would have to be ahead of the curve. But you know what? Nobody's playing defense on the point guard. You didn't have to play defense. There was no reason to hide the little guy. 1987. Houston versus Seattle. Point guards are still just picking up their dribble way at the fucking top of the key. The second they feel pressure. And there is a difference here because defenders are coming up a bit more. Heavy strong hand reliance still across the board. At this point, I'm positive nobody has a left hand. God, this is taking long. We are getting some hand switching, but it's in the open court. When the defender approaches, there is an immediate bailing on the technique. So much dribble termination. The guard opportunity is there. Jabs. I'm still hungry. If you can get your first step past somebody, you could drive. But that's it. The ball came along with you. The ball was an afterthought. 1988. Atlanta versus Boston. Doc Rivers just barely pushes the limit on facing up and dribbling. Danny Ainge is exactly what you think he is. Not a dynamic dribbler. Got Dennis Johnson, a quick guard, but quick was basically what a guard needed to be effective. Shooting is there. The threes are there. Passing. But this idea of facing up is legitimately a new idea. It's pretty amazing how close we are to the 90s and how different this game is. Ball handling is not a factor. 1989. We have arrived. Celtics versus the Kings. And right out of the gate, our announcers say 2 dramatic statements. 1, that the Kings are a 3-point shooting team. But then he goes on to say that guards cannot carry the scoring in this league today. Dribbling like that, they sure can't. Facts. And it may be close to 1990, but this game is the same. Mainly because it's the same group of people. Same group of people who played for the most part of the decade. These guys have maxed out. They're not bringing any new tricks. The league has not seen a great turnover. We do have Kenny Smith here with a bit more bounce and quickness in his dribble, but as you guessed, nothing new in the way of what was to come. So what did I learn after 16 hours of watching 80s basketball? Well, to be completely honest, I'm relieved. I'm relieved that after doing some actual research, I didn't derail my theory. Okay, back to confident me. I learned that point guards rarely face up in the half court. And actually, they rarely use dribbling as a weapon. Their game consists of dribbling up court, stopping and picking up the dribble, turning your back, drifting off to the side. Those are the basic guiding principles of being a point guard between the years of the beginning of basketball in 1988. That's it. I'm an expert now. Fight me. And what are we comparing all of this to? Why did I just endure hours of retro, unskilled hoops? Well, just to get here, my personal favorite, Fred Van Vliet. Van Fleet. Fleet Van Mac. Mac Fred Van Fleet. Fleet. If you don't know, I love this guy. Number 1 reason, I've never heard of him until like 3 weeks ago. And number 2, folks in Toronto really seem to believe that this guy is a good point guard. but the rest of the league and fans outside Toronto could really give two shits about him. Let's watch our boy Freddie. And now with context, range, and limitations of the 80s quite clear, it's not even close. Freddie's a different animal. Faces up 100% of the time. He's not backing people down at the three-point line. He's not turning around. He's not picking up his dribble at the sight of defense. He has ultimate confidence in both hands. For real, it's insane how much of a different game this is. You pick up Fred and place him in any year in the 80s with this skill set, and he would embarrass defenders. Just look, man, I do not need to sit here and break this down because it is so simple to see. And the scary part is that Fred, Mr. Van Vliet, is not even a top-tier guard, and not even the most skilled guards from the 80s demonstrate any of this ball handling expertise. This is my point. This is simply it. The game we play today is at such an advanced level compared to what was going on in the 80s. And we've demonstrated that's the entire 80s. The difference between our game now and what it was in the 80s says a lot about the qualifications we put on the players from the 80s in order to call them all-time greats. They may have great resumes, they may be great in their own context. Between 80 and 89, the game developed a ton. The shooting, the crispness of the passing, the play in the air, the creativity and finishes, well, not by much. But then there's dribbling. And we saw the quote-unquote best. We saw Magic, we saw Bird, we saw Drexler, we saw Isaiah, we saw Dr. J, we saw solid guards like Doc Rivers, and Dennis Johnson, and Danny Ainge, and they were not revolutionizing the game in the way of the dribble. But then the next question, the next assignment, why? And this is when Coach Nick really laid into it. He feels a real type of way about coaches.
As a result, I guess I want to pin on the coaching. I really feel like the coaches have more to deal with this than anything else. Because in the 80s, it was how they taught it in the 60s and the 50s. You know, it was very stagnant for a long time. And that's also the biggest problem. So the argument ends up being, for me, is that it's all coaches. These unimaginative control freaks who would not let, anybody do it. Go back and read about Hank Lucetti, who kind of invented the jump shot. You read what all the coaches were saying about that. They're like, in 1937, 38, they're like, I will never let a player like my team shoot a ball in the air like that. So, and you read about that, and you're like, what are you talking about? This guy was lighting it up in record numbers, because he was elevating over everybody. That's ground zero for when every bullshit stuff from the 100 years before that solidified into a immovable, dogmatic approach to the game. And it's like, and I learned it then. That's why I'm like, thank God it was like I was a cult member and I somehow got out. Because I was in college as a basketball manager in 1993, 94, and I was learning from, top minds of the game, who are still top minds now. And, I'm looking at this going, what the hell were we doing, man?
So clearly this is true, but I still wanted examples. I need to figure out a way to show how coaches and old mindsets actively killed any movement towards these outliers. I need to show my work. So after another few hours of research, bam! I found a couple perfect anecdotes. Perfect anecdotal evidence. That's what you want, right? When you're proving your case. But listen, watch this guy. The guy who arguably originated the concept of modern dribbling, at least in the pros. And see how he was simultaneously being allowed to exist and appreciated and celebrated, but shunned and derided by the powers that be.
Let me see another one.
Well, I'd like to call this what I call my wrist pass, and this is a very...
Watch this one. I saw that. Well, you won't believe it. Watch this one.
Very deceptive pass. Usually on a 3-on-1 situation, you start out throwing the ball in this direction like you're going to throw it out to this man coming in, and actually what happens is it goes the other way. So it's a very good deceptive pass.
Don't try it. Don't try it.
It's very tough on your elbows.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. He can do it, and the players playing with him better know that it's coming.
Did you see that pass? I've never seen a pass like that before. You kidding me? And this guy's initial instinct was,
don't try it.
Yes, he may enjoy showing off, but there was no coach that was going to let their point guard do the same. He was an example and an example. But yes, that's the 60s and early 70s, and my theory goes all the way to 1989-ish. So how am I going to show that coaches were still actively fighting against dribbling progression and general creativity? And here's Magic Johnson doing a classic hit job on children's potential. Side note, 39 points to whoever remembers this intro music. Wait. Well, let's set this up real quick. Here's a good one. Here's a good setup. All right, Coach Nick, with some perspective. Go.
I continually was coached to get low and go. So I was continually dribbling as low and bent over at the waist and way off balance. So it was really frustrating because what was holding, I think, a lot of players back was the teaching. You probably still find charts and videos from the 80s or whatever.
Yes. Bullet.
Your body must be down, low, where you can control the ball and also make quick moves.
Weirdest part of all was that he didn't even follow his own advice. Coming down the court at full speed, he is always upright. You don't see that bend over at the waist thing. But regardless, Magic was not a bleeding edge dribbler. He pushed the boundaries here. This is where Magic was special, in these 2 steps. In the moment right after dribbling, he was the magician, I guess. The fakes, the shots, the spins. But before then, this was his zone, basically inventing the Euro step before the Euro step. Funny enough, then it was mastered by, that's right, Karl Malone. Bet you didn't know that. Look at those 1-2 step right there. Again, proving it's not about who did things first or second. The mile markers are when everybody is doing it. But before then, meh. Though this kid here clearly studied Magic with that wobbly side to side jackhammer dribble. Alright, so now let's go to 1987. This clip right here. This is from 1987 Dr. J training video. Roll it.
Now there's one particular dribbling move that I want to talk to you about. Dribbling through your legs. You use this when you want to protect the ball from a defender who's poking his hands in to try and get it. The secret lies not in moving your hands with the ball. The secret is to move your feet, either by stepping over the ball this way.
I actually own this video.
Or by turning at an angle and hopping over it like this.
I bought one of these videos.
In any event, it's not as difficult as it looks. And I still consider it more of a fundamental move and not so much showing off, provided you use it when it's appropriate.
This is 1987. We have a top era player, one of the more creative players, trying to convince the youth that yes, a through the legs dribble is not just a show off move. What? Was that still being debated? Was that still a debate in the league? The fact that an all-time great, an NBA champion, a revolutionary player in 1987, in a video that is meant for young children just learning the game, or high schoolers who are trying to get better at the game, is trying to convince them and anybody else watching that a simple dribble between the legs is something you should consider. No, it's not just fancy show-off time.
And hopping over it like this.
It is useful. And the fact that that is included in this video coming out of that mouth shows you the mindset of the game in the late 80s. I mean, just go back to the Magic video. By the way, everybody had a damn VHS out back then. That was the shit to do. Anyway, but in his video, Magic never even mentions, never even introduces a through the legs dribble. Magic never even brings it up. So, if that was the discussion or lack of discussion in the late 80s, in the professional level, you can only imagine what's happening in the college level with these type of coaches. These old, stale, play the right way type of coaches. If this is your era, the era that you defend with every ounce of your being, then you should take some advice from the great Justin Hunt and go punch yourself in the face. These guys were good. These guys were the best at the game. Until better players came along and did better things. Just accept that and we can move forward. All right, good night.
Then I'm five. Oh man. You know, it's not too much you can do from down here. But come to think of it.
What the hell was that? Am I dreaming?
are informing you that your subscription to buttblasters.shack will be automatically renewed for the next...
Nope. Wrong one. There's gotta be another one here.
Hey man, I don't know if you saw the other emails, but if you really want to go after Stockton, here's some facts that definitely need to be brought up.
Okay, I'll bite.
If you dig deeper, you'll realize John owes his legacy not so much to the presence of the mailman, Karl Malone, but to the absence of the teacher, Adrian Dantley. Watch an Adrian Dantley game, you'll see the assist killer Stockton almost got saddled, holding the ball for an eternity, faking 4 times out on the wing, waving his teammates out of the post so he can take the defense 1-on-3. No one is earning assists on these plays, but the mailman, he'll give you a reliable assist every time. You're a solid evaluator of all-time greats, right? All-time greats have all-time great games, multiple iconic games. Where is Stockton's great game? No. The best game on your resume can't consist of you passing the ball to other people who did all the work. Not if you're the GOAT. Is John Stockton the only all-time great we make this excuse for? I can't think of another ringless player who routinely makes it into people's top...
I'd finally had enough. I'd been getting these emails for weeks now, and I still couldn't tell if they were bad dreams or reality. I mean, who are these even from? They just say potato. Well, real or not, if I continued to get these emails, I was going to explode or implode. I mean, Stockton was a dead issue. He was meaningless. He meant nothing to me anymore. Shit, he meant as much to me as he did to the Dream Team. Fucking John. Remember that? Remember the Dream Team? Remember how he became the 12th man on the Dream Team? Fucking John. Remember that little documentary about the Dream Team where he did that little stunt? He got off the bus, the team bus, when it was surrounded by fans, and he just walked the streets of Barcelona.
I'm stuck in traffic, and we're just sitting there. Finally, I said, that's it. Let's go. Anybody wants to go with me, I'm heading.
With nobody recognizing him until he literally pulled some girl aside and forced her to recognize him in front of his wife and kids.
Hi.
Hi.
Are you an American?
But of course.
You look wonderful.
Why, thank you.
And I said, have you had a chance to meet anyone?
Of course. We met Charles Barkley the other night.
Did ya? He's a hell of a player. See, you got all the players right there on your shirt. Is Charles the only one you've ever seen?
He's the only one I've ever met.
Hey guys, do you know any of those guys on there?
See, nobody's that meek. What a loser. Can we just add another point here? In this documentary, John tried to play it off as some impromptu move to hop off the bus. But I have to bring attention to all the cutaway shots, which in 1992 clearly required a big-ass crew and big-ass cameras and mics. Anyway, that's just storytelling. I'm fine with that, actually. And seriously, it's not like he added anything to the actual team either. Chuck Daly started Scottie Pippen at that point. John played the least minutes out of everyone, including injured-ass Larry Bird and Patrick Ewing. Strange, right? Greatest all-time pure point guard, can't find a role, literally the 12th man, literally touched the ball the least. And don't talk to me about injury. Dude was cleared, and again, 3 other players had worse injuries coming into camp. Bird, Ewing, and even Drexler. So don't try to bring that up. Don't you? Who am I talking to? Okay, well, clearly I needed some help.
Doc! Hey, Doc!
Oh, hello!
Doc, I had this dream. There's this message in the dream that's just pushing me to do something. It's like pushing me to do something I don't even want to do.
In what form do these messages come to you?
Dude, I said a dream. In a dream.
Yes, but within the dream.
Oh, email. It's like I keep getting these messages in the middle of the night. It's like I even hear the notification.
Well, have you been taking the pills I prescribed?
Every hour on the hour, of course.
That might be a bit much, but what do I know?
What about my dream?
Well, perhaps a barely repressed longing for amputation. But this is all not unrelated to the primary phantasm. Birds, mechanical death, hand? In any case, have you checked your real email? as opposed to the symbolic?
I put a little chart together so you can...
Okay, looks like I have been getting the emails.
A breakthrough! Now you can deal with it.
Dude, you are not good at this. This BetterHelp app sucks.
Fair enough. It's not like I exist anyway.
You don't want to deal with this. People clearly need to be led to the truth. You just can't outright say their favorite player is secretly trash, so start by revealing that maybe he just wasn't so good what's left. We slow walk them to the truth. But what's the point? Well, the point is that you are frustrated. You are fed up with conceding to these people that he is an all-time great.
Hey!
You are full of rage and resentment. But you can't let anyone know what you really think. Because who the heck wants all those people bombarding you with their particularly salty takes? Consider letting steam off. Maybe. Go somewhere nobody can hear you. And just let it out. You can go there once a month, once a week, maybe even once a day. Come to the woods. The new and improved woods.